What I wanted to start with was just an outline of what I know about history, and I won't go into a lot of detail, and I will try to roll in a little bit of how we've gotten to the position that your association is in relation to my office. So we're going to start at the beginning. In 1941, the dam and what we call the drop structure, the part that's out in the lake, were constructed. The dam was designed, if you will, by Mr. Dunlap, and there were some structural components of the drop inlet that were done by Mr. Flagg, who was a surveyor and engineer in the area for a lot of years. When I started doing my work for the state, he was still around. I've met him a time. In 1946, what we call the emergency spillway, the concrete chute that goes around the end, was constructed. Normally, these would be done the construction would all be done at the same time. I have no idea why there was this 5-year separation. It may have been the war. It could have been that they simply wanted the lake to fill up first and see how it responded. Lots of possibilities, none of them particularly known at this point. I'm going to jump all the way to 1963. The chute, the emergency spillway, the chute, and I'll call it the chute probably from here on out, is of interest, and that's part of the discussion of what we're talking about now. The first time we know the chute was repaired was 1963. I think that it was a matter of the outside wall needed repair. The water had gotten behind it. And I also know that at some point the stilling basin failed and was replaced, but I do not know when that occurred. It's possible it was 63. In 1964, the drop inlet was lined. It was originally square on the inside. It is now round on the inside. That change was in 1963 or 1964. In 1972, we did some repairs on the chute again. And again, we don't know for sure exactly. I don't know for sure exactly what was done and whether that's when the stilling basin was modified. I'm going to mention in 1978, in the 1970s, there were nationally a large number of significant dam failures. And as a result of that, the states were told they would start to regulate dam safety. We will note in 1980, the regulations in the state of Illinois were made effective. But in the late 70s, the Corps of Engineers was told to do a basic investigation of many dams. There were like 50,000 dams across the nation. This dam was one of those. The 1978 study talks about a lot of things. It shows some interesting pictures of the tree being used, or the dam being used. Looks like it's being used as a tree farm. You could not see from one side of the dam to the other looking across the top. Those are all considered deficiencies. And along with those deficiencies that were visual, the capability of the spillway system to pass very large floods was questioned. So that first occurs in 1978. In 1981, my office notified the Homeowners Association of the need to obtain a permit. In 1982, by 1982, the Homeowners Association had taken care of a number of the deficiencies the Corps found. And in 1982, my office sent a second notice to the Homeowners Association of the need for a permit. In 1983, there were some correspondence that went back and forth, and I'll just note that at that time, the association indicated they were going to have an investigation done of the spillway capacity. In 1984, my office was notified that that study was currently being delayed. In '85, my office sent the third notice of the need to obtain a permit. In 1987, there was a notice that the application, while it had been submitted, had never been completed. And happily, in 1990, we got everything complete and we issued the permit. And that's really all we need to say about all of that phase of life. In 2013, the association made a major upgrade to what we consider the operation and maintenance documentation, in that we created a separate emergency action plan. So if there is an emergency related to the dam, we have a set of procedures identified in advance of how we will handle the areas downstream and the people that may be in those areas. A major document, not everybody has one of those. In 2016, we had another partial failure of the chute. At that time, my office was contacted as far as making repairs. And at that time, as part of that discussion, I requested specifically that the association come up with a concept to first to actually identify the capacity that existed and whether it was sufficient. And if not, come up with a concept of how we would make modifications to the spillway system to address that, and a timetable. Again, it was not, the association was not told as part of the repairs you have to fix all these things all at once. It was just, we'll do the repairs and we would like to establish a procedure and a timetable. In 2017, in April, I came down and met with some of the board members of the homeowner association and the engineer and some local officials. And we had a discussion about how we were going to address that issue. And that really gets us to today. Your board is asking you to approve, at least as part of the approval, some of the things that will go into actually addressing that issue and getting the dam into compliance with today's standards for a dam of that type. So that's my history, and I may not know everything. Some of you may know a lot more than I do. I will throw in, don't think I mentioned in my history, my first time at the dam was 1987. And so I have been coming here since in my official capacity with the state. One of the questions that is likely to come up, and I will just guess, and it happens a lot, and I'll give you a little idea now, and if we need to, we can go into more detail later. The question always revolves something around, are you picking on my dam or my association? And so just so you have an idea that the answer really is no. We treat everybody as equally as possible. So some examples. Willow Lake Dam is a homeowner association owned dam in Freeport, Illinois. As it works for that one, the original developer did not ever finish construction of his dam. And many years later, we got into a discussion and I asked that homeowner association, before they did some other things they were planning, if they would just finish the dam. And they did. They had to add the stilling basin. If we get into the detail of what's proposed for the emergency spillway, we will talk a little bit about stilling basin. It's down at the bottom when the water is rushing off of the concrete. How do we keep it from rushing downstream and eroding the whole downstream area? That's a stilling basin. So their dam was complete, except there was no stilling basin, so they finished that. Somerset Lake, which is a fairly large association north and west of Rockford, their dam was constructed and it had its principal spillway, but it had no emergency spillway, which became a problem pretty rapidly. And in the early 1990s, I did a meeting with that homeowners association, very much like this meeting, for the purpose of explaining why it was important that they have an emergency spillway, which they subsequently built. A little different situation. There's another dam up north in LaSalle County. It's Lake Holiday, another homeowners association owned dam. When it was built, the dam, the spillway of the dam has some concrete walls that are 30 feet tall. They had an interesting design, and not long after those walls were put in place, they sank as much as 10 feet. Now, they were simply repaired by extending the sunk wall up the 10 feet that they lost. But as we know now, after a lot of other investigation, that dam is on a questionable foundation, and there's really no way to repair it. And so that association has spent several years, almost a decade, developing two sets of plans. One set of plans is if the spillway fails and they only are going to replace the spillway. The other one is if the failure would involve the dam itself, the earthen embankment part, they would replace the entire dam. And that association has created a reserve of $1 million as the down payment that the bank will require to give them the loan to complete either of the constructions, when and if it's needed. They did the reserve over a 5-year period. A couple of things that are going on currently, and let me hit the latest one. Lake of the Woods, which is in Peoria County, north of Peoria. Another homeowners association, they wanted to do some work. They had never actually completed their permitting. They were in that I keep sending them notices phase. And I simply requested that they get their permit for their dam, which will require them to replace, again, a stilling basin that just no longer exists. It is completely gone, and they will be required and have sent the set of plans. I don't have an estimate of the cost on that. And finally, there's another one up far north, Joe Davies County, up by Galena, Apple Canyon. Apple Canyon is going to reconstruct the control section on their spillway, which is a little bit like the entrance to the chute spillway here. They will reconstruct that, and they're doing it, you know, of their own accord because they want a little better control of their lake level.